Hello and welcome to another edition of the Bucknuts Happy Hour. I'm Patrick Murphy from 247 Sports and Bucknuts.com. I have a fun show planned today. We are going to be joined by DeVier Posey, former Ohio State wide receiver who played with Terrelle Pryor and a bunch of those guys back in the day. Talk to him about his career with the Buckeyes, his career after the Buckeyes, what he's up to now. DeVier's a guy that I've gotten to reconnect with here recently, so excited to have him on. He'll join us here shortly on the show. And then once we're done talking with DeVier, I'm going to jump into kind of these preseason rankings that have started to come out. We still haven't gotten the AP and coaches poll yet. Those will come out next month. But kind of just where the Buckeyes are projected to fit into the big picture across the country, in the Big Ten, so on and so forth. So we should have a pretty good show here for you guys. It's the happy hour. The last few episodes, I have not had a beverage other than water. Today, I thought I had a bunch of beer in the fridge. Turns out the beer is in a cooler that we took somewhere last weekend. It is in the back of my girlfriend's SUV. She is at work, so I'm settling for a ranch water hard seltzer. I can deal with that for the happy hour today. Still at least getting something other than water today. So cheers if you're watching this live. Cheers if you're watching this at home. It's almost the weekend. We're recording this on Friday. Excited to get another weekend. Not many more weekends left where we won't have Buckeye football. So we're obviously going to enjoy those, but enjoy these weekends while you still got them, Buckeye fans. Cheers. Real quick before we get DeVier on here, I wanted to address earlier today. Actually, I guess it technically came out a few days ago, initially reported by Nathan Baird of Cleveland.com, but through a public records request, Ohio State reported 2 minor violations. Nothing serious here, but I think it just goes to show how silly the NCAA still is with things. But 2 minor violations that they self-reported. The first was from a recruiting visit last year for the Wisconsin game. Doesn't name the prospect or his family, but they were accompanied by a staff member to visit a former Ohio State player at a tailgate, which was technically off campus. That is a minor violation under the NCAA's rules. So Ohio State has self-reported that. They also provided education to the staff on kind of the campus layout, the campus footprint, and reduced their contact with said prospect. Again, prospect not named, but they kind of pulled back after that. We've seen that happen before when there's been some minor violations. Second violation, and this one's more ridiculous in my mind, but still got to follow the rules as they are right now. February 13th, this was before spring practice, obviously. The players were using a blocking sled in a conditioning workout with additional weight on it, which you cannot do under the NCAA rules for some reason. You cannot use sports-specific equipment during that period in the calendar is basically how the rule reads. So Ohio State actually found this out because they posted one of those videos on, I think, Twitter, and someone from another school reached out and said, hey, you may want to take a look at this. This is technically a violation. So they reported it, and that led to reduced athletic-related activities by half an hour during the week of March 5th through 11th. If those are the consequences, I guess you deal with that. I still think these rules are rather ridiculous in the age that we live in, but some kind of newsy things that popped up today that I wanted to get to. So if you haven't missed that, I posted that story on Bucknuts this morning. You can get to it, or you can read it on there. But let's get into it here. Let's dive in. We've got DeVier with us now. DeVier, what's going on, my man?
What's up, Pat? How you doing?
I'm good. Good to have you on. It's I know we mentioned when I ran into you in the press box last year, we wanted to do something like this. So I'm glad we were able to make it work and whatnot. So welcome to the Bucknuts Happy Hour, as we call it.
Oh, nice. Happy hour got started a little early, I see.
Yeah. I was saying right before you got on, I have a hard seltzer here because all the beer we apparently had in our house is in my girlfriend's trunk in a cooler that we took somewhere last weekend. So this is what I'm working with. Not going to do anything too crazy here, but
nice. Just take it easy into the weekend.
Yeah, right. It's a slow build. I think I'm talking to Timmy tonight. Are you on the show tonight?
No, I'm not on tonight. I'm not. I think I'm on next week. Yeah.
All right. Well, I got to slowly build to that. I can't be too crazy for talking with Timmy on Beers and Buckeyes. Anyway, let's dive into stuff with you. I want to go back and kind of talk about – I want to start with your recruitment to Ohio State. I was looking back on it because obviously it's been some time now.
Yeah.
Looked from what I could find. Obviously, the recruiting services were different back then. Who were the other big players kind of involved in your recruitment, and what do you kind of remember from that time in life? Obviously, a pretty awesome time, I imagine, when schools are coming after you, kids like that.
I would say the big players personally was my mom. Obviously, when Hazel and Tressel come knocking at your door, it's very, very hard to say no to those guys, right? And then for us, we were a bit unique as a class at that time. We were kind of recruiting each other, right? It was a center, Mike Brewster. He committed really early out of Florida, and he was one of the like higher ranked players in the class of 2008. And so once everybody started getting their stars, and we kind of immediately went to, the text message groups and was just trying to get all of our guys to, to commit. We were corresponding with coaches, like, who do you guys want, blah, blah, blah. And, we'll be a part of that process. So I think, me, Brewster, Mike Adams, Jake Stoneburner, JB Shugarts, those guys were some of the guys that committed really early. I committed in March of my junior year.
Yeah.
And so being able to be another force, right, for Ohio State recruiting at the time to help get Terrelle Pryor here, because Terrell, like, his recruiting surpassed signing day. So we were able to kind of really just help Ohio State, bring him home. So I would say it was my mom, obviously, when Tress and Hazel entered the picture, and then just the other guys, right? The other guys in the class of 2008.
Did you really consider any other programs, or was Ohio State, once they got involved, was that where you wanted to be?
Yeah, I always grew up loving just Cincinnati. Geographically, we get a lot of SEC games. So I grew up, loving Miami. My uncle played at Michigan. I had a love for Adrian Peterson and Malcolm Kelly at Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And obviously, who didn't love USC back then? So, if those schools entered the picture, I always felt like, man, I got to take my visits out there. And then Florida was a superpower at the time with Urban Meyer and in the Tim Tebow era. Right. But like, the only school to offer me at all those schools I mentioned was Oklahoma, Florida, and USC. And by the time I committed so early, Coach Tress knew how to do and say things that wouldn't be like restricting, but he would say stuff like, hey, like, how would the Ohio State fans feel if you took a visit to this school, right? And it was just like, you're right, Coach. I don't want to piss the fans off. So he knew how to keep guys locked in, and those were probably the only other schools I would even kind of let take a look at all.
You got to answer that?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Just want to make sure it wasn't important. It's funny you say that, because even like now, Ohio State, they don't prohibit guys from going on other visits, and you being a wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith, the top wide receiver in this class, has taken full advantage of that, visiting a bunch of different programs. But I imagine there are similar conversations with players now of like, you don't want to let these fans down that have, especially now with social media and stuff, everyone knows what everyone's doing. So let's fast forward. You mentioned Terrelle, that class. I remember that class very fondly. I actually remember in
hold on. I'm gonna do not disturb. Give me 1 second. Let me see if
You're good. You're good.
There we go. All right, I'm good to go.
All right. Sorry. All right. No worries.
Apologize.
You're fine. This is part of doing it live. I have my dog barking back. It happens. But no, looking forward a little bit, you mentioned Terrelle. What was it like kind of dealing with that? Because as you said, that recruitment went beyond signing day. It was obviously a huge deal. The whole country was kind of paying attention to what he was doing. What was it like kind of being behind the scenes, so to speak, a little bit on that? And when he finally committed to the Buckeyes, what was the reaction from kind of the class at large?
I mean, when you think back to his recruitment, even now, it's hard to argue like a prospect bigger than him, right, for football and basketball. So It was a lot of stuff just going into, can Ohio State possibly get this guy, and what it would mean to, the Ohio State room as a whole, quarterback room, and just even the legacy of Ohio State. And when you look at a player like Terrelle, I mean, Troy Smith, he won the Heisman, but he really wasn't that, he was a pro style quarterback. He really wasn't that zone option, zone read guy. And then boom, you get Terrelle to commit. And then you look at all these other guys, these dual threat quarterbacks that have entered the college scene, sometime after him, Justin Fields, Barrett, Haskins, even CJ Stroud, and just like what it did to the legacy of Ohio State quarterbacks. I really think, he helped change that whole landscape of like what you think about as an Ohio State quarterback.
You were obviously an Ohio kid, so you were very familiar. But what do you think it did for that class, which was obviously a huge class? Buckeyes coming off of back-to-back appearances in the national championship game. I know they lost them both, but just getting to that point, Tressel had won in 2002, but getting back to those games, how do you think that affected that class and allowed you guys to build what you did?
Well, I mean, that was something that I really remember, like those guys playing at a high level and really wanting to come in and learn, behind guys like Hardline and Robisky who played in national championships. Like these guys were super experienced. I thought they were technicians at the time. And for us, like if you look at like all the position groups, we all had somebody to learn from, right? I remember, offensive lineman, Alex Boone was a big prospect for everyone. And then, I know Mike Adams and Sugarts wanted to learn from him. And then there was always like that one player that we were looking at that played in those games. Like, maybe I can go to Ohio State and have some success. And that's what we would love to do is play at that, national level and make it to that BCS national championship game eventually.
Yeah. When you get to Ohio State, obviously you're a 4-year guy. When you look back at your Ohio State career, is there a game, a play, something that like stands out above everything else for you that maybe, kind of defines in your mind your Ohio State career?
I enjoy my Michigan touchdowns. I think that's always cool to be able to say you played it in that, one of the greatest rivalries in sports, like, not just football, but even NFL, NBA, baseball, like just to say you played an Ohio State Michigan game and to score in 2 of those games, that means a lot to me. And also my bowl game touchdowns, because I felt like, every time I scored in a bowl game, it kind of did something in the momentum, whether it was the Rose Bowl or Sugar Bowl and even the Gator Bowl. Like I value those, but I often think about the plays that I won back, right? The plays
Sure.
that I did make more than anything, more than the ones you do make, but the plays that you didn't make, it's crazy. You can't ever go back and fix mistakes, but I think about those more than the ones that actually came through.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, right? With athletes. I was a soccer guy. I still play like co-ed soccer, but I come home after games sometimes and I'm just like thinking back through the game. It just drives you nuts, the mistakes you made or whatnot, even if you had a good game, right?
Yeah. It does drive me nuts. I mean, I think one play that I often think about my junior year, I think I finished with like 950 or something like that, 954, 948, something like that, yard total for the season. But it was a play on 3rd down. We were playing in Iowa, and it was like they were playing cover 2 the whole game. And so like it's just like 2 high safeties. And so like me and Dane had these routes where we would go to the boundary and like Dane would take away the inside safety and I would outside release, and it would just be like an easy goal ball. And I'm talking like Terrelle threw a punt up. It was like in the air. And it's one of those plays where like, oh yeah, this is a touchdown. It's the game winner. Lapse of concentration. It was easily like a 60-yard bomb. Just goes through my chest like I have a hole in my chest, right? And then like the next morning, the lantern, like I'm like sitting like this, and Brutus is behind me with his hands in his head. And it's like I think about that play all the time because, right, catch that, boom, we win the game. Terrelle doesn't have to. I think Terrelle ran for like a 4th and 16. We ended up winning, right? But just for my totals, I'm at 1,000 yards, right? I'm at 60 catches for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. And it's just like, if I could have that one back, that's the one I want back because I was just shy of 1,000 yards. Yeah. Crazy to think about.
Yeah, That's nuts. I always think about your Rose Bowl touchdown. I don't know why that one stands out among them, but maybe it was just because it'd been a long time since Ohio State had been back in the Rose Bowl. Now they've gone out there a handful of times recently, but that game just, it popped for me, and then make a play like that. That's one I always think about with your career.
Yeah.
Some of the guys you played with, you mentioned, obviously Terrelle, but who are some of the other guys that, like a guy like Dane, I remember when he was here, kind of an underrated guy that really had a big role. Who were some of the guys maybe that you thought really stood out, maybe that didn't stand out to fans, but had a role either behind the scenes or guys that you saw having a career after you, just some guys that popped in your mind back in your career?
Just guys that really like popped to me, like work ethic wise. Like I kind of knew, I wasn't surprised with Nate Ebner's story at all. Okay. When he came to Ohio State, he was just one of those guys that was competing in the weight room, challenging starters. And you're like, man, who is this guy, right? But this guy just had this will to win and this will to just work hard that was just next to nothing. And like he always stood out to me, and I wasn't surprised at the NFL career he had. I loved playing and practicing against Cam Hayward. Like he brought another level to practice every single day. I mean, like this dude, you would be fearful that he might tackle you. He would tag off so hard in like shells and helmets, but that's just how he played. He played hard every single play, right? And a guy that I know a lot of people forget about, that was so talented. And to me, just coming from Southern Ohio and being a track guy, this dude dominated the track, and that was Brandon Sane. Like this dude was so talented, so mild-mannered that I probably can't even find him on social media right now. He's just like a quiet guy, but you're talking about talent, speed, did everything so naturally. He was a guy I think that often gets forgot about, within Boom and Carlos Hyde, that era. And I mean, for some reason, Trust always had me kind of hosting guys, right? You talk about guys that came after me. We were always able to host, a lot of big recruits. I think I hosted Braxton, Devin Smith, Corey Brown, Carlos Hyde. My roommate was a linebacker, so he hosted ATN Sabino. He hosted Ryan Shazier and a lot of guys that came in on the defensive side. And so I always loved that part, right? Just showing guys like this is the reason why you want to come here. And I think it's helped, as we've all grown and gone through our college careers. Like, I'm friends with all those guys that I hosted, right? It's we can always pick up the phone and call each other and laugh about things. But I remember I hosted Carlos Hyde, man. It was funny because the night I hosted him, that was the night that I met my wife. So I'll never forget that day. We lost to Penn State. I think it was like Derek Williams, Jordan Norwood, Aaron Maben team. Daryl Clark was at quarterback.
Yep.
We lost in the shoe in a night game, and I really didn't feel like hosting that night. Didn't feel like hosting it at all, Pat. I was like, oh God. And so it was a party not too far from the dorms, and so I decided to take these guys out, Carlos Hyde, and ended up meeting my wife in that party. So. I appreciate Tress always making me a host, and I always kind of value those relationships that I was able to build with guys before they got here.
That's a crazy story. I mean,
yeah.
Who knows? You guys win that game, maybe you go somewhere else. Maybe things go differently. It's crazy how those things tend to work out. I'm not surprised Tress trusted you with hosting guys, having gotten to know you a little bit. You seem like a guy who could handle that responsibility, I think.
It was always fun, man. I just, showing up the facility, talking to the parents, and just be like, all right, man, this is what life is like as an Ohio State guy. So I always enjoyed that part.
Yeah. Your career, I think, will, for good or for bad, will always be associated with kind of how things ended with the Tattoogate stuff. I don't know how much you want to get into all that, and I don't want to force you to talk about it all, but just to have the career you had, and then to have something like that now these days is completely legal. Just how do you kind of view it from that perspective of like, obviously this was your guys' stuff. If you did it today, it wouldn't be a problem. just, it changed the trajectory of things a little bit, I think. How do you view it now looking back on it?
I guess looking back on it, it's one of the, I still have the files in my file cabinet over here of all of the NCAA, like, I guess you call them depositions or whatever.
Yeah.
But on the top of them, it's a name, image, and likeness case, right? It was something where we understood as players that we had some type of value in the community with who we were, with our persona. I think what was tough is playing a video game with yourself. And I think, my guy had like long hair and dreads, and it was like, but no, that's really me wearing number 8 out there. And I think that was tough, just to always just see, how much money everybody was making. And then we did it. I know the tattoo thing is what people remember the most, but
sure,
we were in the community, signing autographs or, taking pictures and, things like that, making appearances. And we were like charging fees. And I think that's what really upset the NCAA more than anything, is that we had that understanding that, in our meetings is like, well, you guys are making money. Why can't we? What's wrong with that? And I think now when you think back, it's laughable, but like, I don't laugh much about it. I know that it was something that I think hurt my draft stock. It really hurt our national championship, probability going into that next year. We lost Terrelle in the supplemental. Obviously everybody knows what happened to Tress, but it was one of those things where it kind of had to happen for, people to be where they are here now, right? And Ohio State to be one of the places, one of the universities that's leading this NIL, what would you say, boat, or leading it towards where it needs to be. It's something that, it just had to happen, right? Like we had to go through that for people to capitalize on it now. So I don't really, it's been a rough road, but I think the thing for me that I've always tried to do is just still be DeVier, still be solid through it all, right? Take my lumps on my chin, and always smile and always take the high road, right? And it's always paid off, because I think I've been able to keep my character, unblemished through it. And if you look back, it's really the only bad thing you can really say about me. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
it's
even if you call it bad, like, I don't know if that's even right.
If you call it bad, never got in trouble at Ohio State. Was a great student, always loved and revered the Ohio State tradition, and was always proud to be a Buckeye and a wide receiver at Ohio State. And I think, it's something that just laid the groundwork for today.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But let's look ahead. You mentioned NFL. You were still, despite missing some games that year, you're still a 3rd-round pick. What do you say when you think back on your NFL, the time in the NFL? Because, what were you, 4 years in the league?
Yep.
How do you kind of view that period of life before you went off to the CFL?
I think, the thing with the NFL, it's an awesome job. And I love J.J. Watt's quote, like, success isn't like the rent is due every day, baby. Like, you gotta put in the work in. I think learning to become a pro is a process for a lot of guys. And then there's just like the freaks that are just super talented and are just like immediately productive. I think for me, learning how to be a pro and just coming off a year where I only played 3 games, like I wasn't in rhythm my rookie year. So I really didn't even crack the lineup until like October of my rookie year. And I was just inactive, just learning. And then finally, when I was able to crack the rotation, I was able to really, find production. And then my best game was in the playoffs. We won the wild card against the Bengals, and then went up to New England, and that was probably my best game. And boom, snapped my Achilles, right? And so at that point, I had to learn how to recover and take care of your body. And then that's another level of, the NFL. Like, people always hear like LeBron puts in, $1 million into his body. If somebody would have told me that back then, I would have loved to hear that information.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting that you then go off to the CFL, where I don't think a lot of Ohio State fans are aware of kind of that league as much. I remember watching. I assume it was the playoffs. I know you ended up winning a Grey Cup up there. Would you say was the biggest transition to that kind of football, because it is different? And what do you remember from your time as a CFL player?
I think you have to know more a little bit, because there's an extra guy out there. There's things built into the route concepts in the plays, like motion or the waggle, that you can kind of use to your advantage. I think I kind of went through 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so I went through 3 transitions. I always call them. One transition was coming from the NFL game, which is a tighter field.
Yeah,
routes are sharper. Catch windows are smaller. Things, I feel like guys are faster, in and out of routes. Going to CFL, you might not need to come out of that comeback or out of that goal ball or that cornerback ball as fast as you think, because the field is bigger. The quarterback might give you more time to get into space. So just learning the nuances, right? And then after that year in Toronto, we won a Grey Cup. I went back to the NFL and played for the Ravens. And so just studying a playbook after looking at 24 guys on the field, the NFL game seemed way more simple to me. It seemed way less complex, right? Because it's not as many players. And so when I'm looking at it, I'm like, wow, like, man, I wish I would have learned how to do it. And then also just playing at a championship level, no matter what league it is, like 2-minute drives, understanding, being 1, 2, or 3 in a read. I didn't know those things before I got to Canada, and just playing at that championship level, attention to detail was something that I brought back to when I went back to Baltimore. And then it's just one of those things, right? It's politics. Like I'm not a drafted guy anymore. I'm not this guy from Ohio State. I'm a CFL guy. I got that tag.
Sure.
So it's just like, how do I beat out these draft picks and people they invest the money in free agency? And it was just like a learning experience. And I just kind of was like, it's a lot of high stress, but this is just football, man. The media, fantasy, all of these things just hype it up more and more. But it's same. You get the same recreation up in Canada. Like you get the same play. It's like your body still feels just as sore. So for me, I was just like, I want to finish my career playing at that level, right? Playing at championship level. I'm not sure if I want to be 4th or 5th receiver on the depth chart, fighting for a team, special teams. Like I'd rather just go back and be a number 1, number 2 guy in Canada and enjoy it. I mean, because everybody likes their coffee different, Pat. Like you might like sugar cream, I might like French vanilla and no cream. But the way I like my football serve is catching the ball. Like I don't really like to tackle people. You know what I mean? Right. So I'm not gonna say I'm the best special team player in the world. And I just kind of knew myself, and I had a stress-free just enjoyment of football, and I just kind of wrote it out up there. Played for 3 more teams. After I left Baltimore, I went back and played for Vancouver, BC Lions, and then Montreal Alouettes. Had my son in Canada. He's a Canadian. You probably can hear him in the background acting a little crazy. He's my crazy kid. And then played in Hamilton, and then finished in Vancouver. And I was pretty much good after that. I got what I needed from football, and it was an awesome experience, man. The people up in Canada are great. They're great people, and I played with a lot of great teammates.
What's the reception like, just in terms of, we see the NFL stadiums and whatnot, but what's it like up there in terms of how, attendance, how you guys are received in the communities and whatnot? Because, it is a different sport a little bit. How do they kind of treat CFL players up there?
Well, the NFL is younger than the CFL. I played in the 55th Grey Cup or 54th Grey Cup. So they had 150 championships before I even got up there. NFL is still under 100. So it's the game is older in Canada. They have fans that follow the CFL and the 9 teams, for their whole lives. And I think the thing that the NFL does a great job with is marketing, right? And partnerships. And I think the CFL kind of suffers with that just because it's a league that's not as big and the salary cap isn't as high. So they can't pay guys more. But if you think back to guys like Archie Griffin or Tom Cousineau, they were using CFL contracts as leverage when they got drafted by the NFL to get more money as rookies. I mean, Cousineau, he told me a story how he was trying to leverage Montreal Alouettes contract with his NFL team that drafted him. I think he was like first overall, and he ended up having to take the CFL deal because it was that much more money at the time. And so the CFL it's been around for a while, and the fans love their game, and they know it's a unique game. And it's I'm just happy I got to play in both, right? I got to be a part of both sides, and it's they love their teams up there for sure.
I think it's really important what you said about, you wanted to play, you wanted to enjoy your career. I think, again, going back to kind of the soccer side of things, you talk to guys that come to MLS from overseas, and maybe it's not as high of a level, but it's still a high level, and you still get to play. You get to be a professional in the sport that you grew up playing. And, I think maybe other guys decide they just want to be in the NFL, right? And just, be on special teams, be on practice squad. But I like that you did things the way you wanted it to be done. That I think there's a lot to be said about that. Let me ask you, as we kind of fast forward to Ohio State now, you see the offenses. There's my dog. I told you. You see the offenses that Ryan Day and Urban Meyer before him ran. How do you view that in comparison to what you guys had? Because the game's changed, I know, but when a guy like Ryan is running the offense, no. How do you kind of view this the offense they have now at the Buckeyes and the guys that they've got in that program?
I think for me, I'm jealous, right? These dudes are getting 10 to 12 targets a game. We weren't 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but we were a run-first offense, coming off of Beanie, boom and zoom, and then going into the Carlos Hyde era, right? It was an offense that was heavily built on the run and play action. I think I would have loved an opportunity to play in a pass-first offense, right? It would have been a great opportunity for me, But I think that's how football has evolved since I was playing. The game has changed. It's changed year in and year out, and just being able to see how these offensive coordinators can be so creative with getting guys involved, finding matchups. We didn't really play in a matchup type of offense where it was this is the weak link. Let's circle him. We're going to put this guy in as many uncomfortable situations as possible. No, we were this is what we do. Let's try and get this concept out of this formation. And it was more about identity and sticking to it. But I think now the evolution of the game, it's almost like the NBA, right? Where you can put players in pick and rolls or ISO situations and just find the best matchup to get points. Football has kind of gone down that lane now, right? Where it's we're going to find where the weak link of the defense is. We're going to continue to do what we do. We're going to get different looks, but we're going to find that matchup and we're going to expose it until they stop it. And I think I would have loved to be in something like that because I think, one-on-one was one of my strengths as a receiver, just winning, especially at the college level. It was just I was so happy to get those opportunities, which would probably come 1 to 4 times a game. Now, I mean, you look at guys Marv, JSN, they're able to have these 10 catch games. I wasn't even getting 10 balls thrown my way, right? It was no chance for me to get that. And so just love the way the game has revolutionized and it's changed. And also with the rules, Pat, the rules are more offensive friendly. They want you to score points. And I know a lot of defensive guys will second that, right? Because the pass interference and the targeting, they want you. It's aimed to keep the game safe, but also as a fan, me and you, we're fans. We're in the media space. We want to see points scored, right? We want to see guys get in the end zone. We want to see field goals. We want that score to be high. So would have loved to play in a system like this today, man. These guys are super lucky.
You mentioned a guy like Marv. When you look at this receiver room that Ohio State has coming into this season, as a receiver yourself, just how do you kind of view the talent that they've accumulated? Obviously Brian Hardline and whatnot, but you got to have the quarterback too. You just kind of how do you see that whole situation, and specifically from your eyes as a wide receiver?
I mean, when I played there, it was guys like Chris Carter, Joey Galloway, Terry Glenn, David Boston, Ted Ginn. Those guys, Anthony Gonzalez, that a lot of people forget about as a first-round pick. Like Gonzo used to come back and work with me on Tuesdays and Thursdays and really help me with my routes and stuff like that. And also I had a relationship with Ted Ginn, but those guys were always around it. Like the receiver tradition has never ever stopped at Ohio State, right? Yeah. Like since CC got there, and even before that, the Paul Warfields of the world, and it's just something that has just gone to another level, right? And when you see guys play in a uniform before you and you recruit, you're like, man, I can see myself in this guy. So to see what Hardline, one of my former teammates, has done, he understands that. Like he understands what I'm talking about when it comes to Ohio State being receiver U for a very long time. And he's always been aware of that. So wanting to take that to another level is just, that's what he's done. Finding guys that fit those comps, those pro comparables. Like he's going to go get a 6'2" to 6'4" guy to be your X. He's going to go find a 6 foot to 6'2" guy that can blow the top off like a Buka. Then he's going to find like the best slot receiver, right? And if you really look at how he recruits, he's recruiting guys that fit these comps, right? Like Tate and Ennis, those guys. Ennis is a slot guy. He mimics JSN's build and ability, right? And then you have a guy like Carnell Tate that images Emeka Buka, right? And Olave. Then you got a guy like Jeremiah Smith, right? Coming in the next year. He mimics some Marvin Harrison. So he's just rinsing and repeating this cycle of going and getting these guys with these high stars, these abilities that just shoot through the ceiling. I love what's going on. I mean, I'm proud to, just be like a little dot. If you look at a timeline of Ohio State guys going all the way back to Paul Warfield, like me and Dane, we got a dot right there between 2008 and 2012. And it's just, I'm happy to be able to help carry on the tradition to, Devin Smith, and Mike Thomas, and then those guys carried on, Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin, and stuff like that. So it's pretty amazing to be a part of that.
Are you surprised that Hardline took this route he obviously played in the NFL for quite a few years. Are you surprised that he, decided to get into coaching? Because there is kind of a story about, he wasn't really into it at first. Are you surprised that, and then the success that he's had just being somebody who knows him from being his teammate, like you said?
No, not surprised at all. I mean, Hardline was really one of the first guys out, upperclassmen that like pulled me aside and said, hey, like, this is what it's about. This is what Hazel was talking about. This is how you run a slant. This is how you run an out route. This is how you step on toes on a post. This is how you cover a guy up on fades. Him and Rabisky were really on me early to become that guy. And he was a guy in the film room that would like, hey, coach, stop. I want to tell DeVier something. You know what I mean? Even as an older player, like that's who he was. It's just naturally who he is. And then boom, he leaves Ohio State, has the NFL career he has. And then one thing you can't ever take away as a player, people say, can a former player be a great coach? But what you can't stop is a good vet that cares about the development of a young player, right? Whether you like coaching or not, there's a place for you in this world, and that is coaching. And I found myself to be a vet that cared about seeing a freshman or a rookie come in, not knowing how to do something or not understanding like coverage recognition. And then by the end of the year or by the end of training camp, boom, they got it, right? It's because you taught it to them, or they saw what you were saying in that film session. And Hardline has always had that attribute to him, even as a player. And so I'm not surprised at all to see him doing this as a coach. I mean, he's super detailed. Things that these guys are learning, they're getting coached by a pro, like a guy that could probably do it at the next level if he wanted to. But they're getting top-notch coaching in college. And I mean, there's no shot at none of my NFL coaches or anything like that, but I always said this: the best facilities that I've ever been involved in were at Ohio State, and being around some of the best coaches and players was at Ohio State, man. And then just the family that you were able to have at that school, and just the legacy, like everybody takes pride in it. So not surprised at all.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't know him. I've gotten to know him more as the coach than the player, but you can certainly see why there's been success if you watch him out working with guys at camps or whatnot. What do you? I know what you're up to, so to speak, but tell the listeners what you're doing now. What's DeVier Posey up to post playing career and whatnot? I'm sure some of the people here locally in Columbus have heard you on the Fan, but what all is going on in your life?
I think for me, I was a vet that wanted to help young players, but I'll be honest, I'm not coaching. Like I got, you can hear my kids in the background. I got 3 boys. I'm married. I retired in 2021 and we moved back to Columbus that year. And I studied communications in college, right? I always loved talking about the game. I always loved the media aspect and sort of being the voice behind, game recaps or wanting to figure out what's going on, predictions, stuff like that. So I'm doing radio. I'm also an entrepreneur. I have a few other businesses that I do, during the day. But more importantly, just being a dad and just trying to build in this media space, right? And just trying to, find what fits me, better, whether it is radio or is it calling games, whether it's, studio, preview, post game, highlights, whatever. I just love being around football. I love talking about it. I love showing fans what players see, or, hey, take a look at this perspective you might not know. And if you follow me on Twitter, I think I give maybe wild, not outlandish takes, but something for you to think about. And so I've always been a guy that is kind of lean towards that. So I'm kind of doing that with my time now, Pat, and it's been very enjoyable so far.
Good. I mean, I've enjoyed when we've talked on the Fan. I enjoy listening to you when you're on with Tim and some of the other guys. So I think you're doing a great job with it. So keep it up. I hope you find whichever lane it is in this media landscape. I got a couple quick questions for you from some of our people on Bucknuts, and then we'll get you out of here so you can go deal with the kids. First one came from one of the guys on our message board. He asked about your contact with some of your teammates. You mentioned some of the guys, but he specifically said guys like Dame. How much are you guys in contact still? How much you guys see each other? Things like that.
Well, since living back in Columbus, obviously it's a lot more. When I was, on both sides of, when I was closer to the Pacific Ocean and closer to the Atlantic Ocean, it was hard to stay in contact. But guys that one of my best friends is Boom Heron, obviously AT and Sabino. Those guys were in my wedding. Beanie Wells, still close with him. Rabisky, we still talk. And I get to see Dame, probably 3 to 4 times a year. Stoneburner, we always make sure we grab coffee and our lunch every now and then. Everybody has their own lives and their own kids now. But Jake Ballard, I make sure I stay in contact with him. I see Braxton all the time. And I think for me, speaking about the tattoo situation, it's unique because it's brought gifts, right? It was like a moment in time where it connected me to Buckeyes from the past for forever, and then Buckeyes from the future for forever. So even if I don't have a relationship with somebody, I can make a relationship with them, whether they know me from that, whether they know me from my time, and I have Buckeye friends. I'm friends with Keith Byers and Mike Dawson and, Will Allen. I've golfed with those guys. We're in a cigar group. We talk about different cigars that we smoke. I got to meet David Boston down in Miami at an AAU tournament, and just being able to connect with him. Guys from the future. I'm close with Paris Campbell, Cardell Jones, those guys, even guys that I didn't play with, Von Bell, and then also the Buckeye cruise, this cruise that we do. You can just connect with guys, and it's just so funny. It's like we're all the same. Like we all come from similar backgrounds, or we all had similar experiences at Ohio State. We just played at different times. So I'm cool with a lot of guys, man. People would be surprised with some of the relationships I do have now.
I think they call that the brotherhood. capital B.
Sacred brotherhood, Pat. It's sacred.
There we go. One question we had from another guy in Bucknuts. Cincinnati, being a Cincinnati guy, you probably have perspective. It's not it doesn't tend to be the hotbed. There you go.
Rolling right now, baby. Let's go.
It doesn't tend to be the hotbed recruiting wise that other places in Ohio are. Do you have any perspective as to why Cincinnati is not where Ohio State goes? They don't tend to land, and they certainly have gotten guys like you, Paris Johnson. There's certainly a list of them, but with the talent that comes out of that city, why aren't there more headed to Ohio State in your mind?
I think it's just visibility. I think it's like a TV radio problem, right? You're not in Cleveland and Columbus. Ohio State is everywhere. It's just everywhere. I mean, growing up, me and my brother had a brother that was, 1 year in front of me in sports and 2 years in front of me in school. He was redshirt at Ohio University, but we would get on the bus and we would go to Midnight Madness at the University of Cincinnati. I'm talking Bob Huggins, Jason Maxill, Kenyon Martin, when, those days. And then just when we would turn on the TV, our CBS would give us SEC games. Sure. We wouldn't get Ohio State games. So I grew up, my blue blood school is the Kentucky. Like I watched Tayshaun Prince's run to a national championship. I had a lot of love for the Wildcats growing up because they were always on our screen. And then you had Xavier, David West, and Andrew Lavender, those guys that played down there. So we have a lot of other big universities that compete on a national level in Cincinnati. So I think it's that factor too. And then also, it's just, I don't know if they recruit Cincinnati as hard, but guys aren't there's not diehard Buckeye fans in Cincy. I had a locker buddy, Elliot Hebler, is my guy, man. He was in my wedding too. When Ohio State offered me, he kind of brought to my attention how much of a big deal it was. And I was just like, really? It was a big deal? He's like, are you serious? Like, do you even know who Jim Trust? I was like, but I know he wears the sweater vest. That's just about all I knew about Ohio State. And then when I came north to Columbus and I'm walking through the halls and I'm like, oh, whoa, the guy from the Cowboys, Terry Glenn, played here. Chris Carter played here. David Boston played here. Santonio Holmes, who's with the Steelers, he played here. Like I didn't know anything about him just because they weren't on my TV screen growing up. And so it's interesting you said that. I was speaking with somebody about doing some spots down on a Dayton radio station, and their whole goal is to grow Columbus and Dayton. And it's just like you guys don't got a lot of support. So I think that's part of the issue too, Pat. Like it's not as prevalent as Columbus and Cleveland.
Interesting. That's interesting. I've had friends that are down there, so I've been down there plenty. I guess I'll need to pay more attention. Like, what schools do I see people wearing shirts of and stuff down there? I'll have to kind of note that a little bit.
It'll blow you away. It'll blow you away. You won't see as much Ohio State as you do here.
Yeah,
it's just not stores. Like you can walk in a store and they might have or a car dealership or something. They might have a poster of Ohio State Stadium or something like that, or big Ohio State Block O. Like not Cincy. It's just not everywhere like that. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Last one here, and this was from Tyler in our live comments here. What do you want us, I assume it means the Buckeyes there, to improve this year? If there's one area you think that this team needs to improve the most, we'll kind of modify it so you don't have to go through a bunch of things. What would that be to kind of get where they want to go in 2023?
I would love for the Buckeyes to stay healthy this year. I think, injuries really slowed us down as a team and catching momentum late. And that's, that's a toss up, right? But I'm not as worried about like the quarterback position as many people are.
Yeah.
There's so much talent all over this team. Like the offensive line, they will be able to protect the quarterback. It's Ohio State. We'll always have a guy, right? Like this. There's always a guy that can protect the ball. We recruit great. You just don't know his name yet. The receiver room is stacked. The running back room is probably even more stacked to me. If you look at just pound for pound, what each one of those guys can carry a team with 1,000+ yards at any other school in the Big Ten. Defense, I think our DBs are back to being BIA, and we've been able to recruit some guys, and the guys who were inexperienced last year have 2 years with Jim Knowles in his system, right? Our linebackers have depth. Tommy Eichenberg and Still Chambers, and like I know, CJ Hicks has been an emerging name that's going to definitely give us a lot of, depth there. And then honestly, the biggest strength to our team is our defensive line. I mean, those guys are very deep. The last year it was a question like, can they get pressure on the quarterbacks? Now, these guys, it's going to be a sack race. It's going to be like Philadelphia Eagles last year. They're going to be very good and get after the quarterback. So when I think about the quarterback, it's not really many areas you can improve. It's just stay healthy and just give this guy playmakers, right? Don't Kyle McCord, Devin Brown, whoever it is. You don't have to be CJ. You don't have to be Dwayne Haskins. We're not asking you to be Justin Fields. Just don't drop the snap. Hand it to Maya, hand it to Travion, get it to Cade Stover, have a nice blanket there. And then there's a guy over in the boundary that's probably the best draft prospect in this year's draft, and that's MH2. Guy has a PhD in football. He's been around his whole life. Just get him the ball and don't turn it over. And I think if we kind of take that mentality and just attack teams and just be who we are and stay healthy, I don't know if there's much that we can improve on, but I mean, everybody has their last game on the season, circle, right? Like, obviously that's an area of improvement is beating Michigan. But what bigger challenge than the seniors who haven't got a chance to beat Michigan? You need to go up to Ann Arbor in your senior year and you need to knock them out of the playoffs, or you have to go up there and just find a way to win, right? And finish your senior year off right. So stay healthy and beat Michigan.
Yeah. I think everyone would take that in Buckeye Nation. I think people would be pretty happy with the okay. All right, DeVier, I appreciate it, man. This has been great. We talked way longer than even I expected. So thanks for the time.
Sorry.
That's great. I do the same. I'm it fills the time. So I'm glad to do it. We'll have you back on, man. I really, this was fun. I think people will really enjoy this. So thanks again for taking the time.
No problem, Pat. Anything you need, bud.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. All right. Thanks again to DeVier Posey for coming on. That was fantastic stuff. If you missed anything from him, if you tuned in late, you'll be able to catch this podcast recorded anywhere you get your podcast, YouTube. It's also on Facebook, on Twitter, if you want to go there and watch it back. So available, like, subscribe, all that good stuff that helps us out. We are now just about 53 minutes into what's usually an hour-long show. I didn't want to stop talking with DeVier because we were having so much fun. So I'm still going to talk about it, but this may be an abbreviated version of what I had planned, which is kind of where the Buckeyes fit into this national landscape, the Big Ten, going into the 2023 season. And my coworker, Steve Hellwagon, put up a story on Bucknuts yesterday, this morning maybe, yesterday, I don't know. Recently, it's on there if you want to find it, of kind of the consensus polls so far. He's going to update it once the AP polls and coaches polls comes out. But he went through a bunch of different polls that have been released, the rankings that have been released, Sporting News, Athlon, ESPN, R247 Sports One, a whole bunch of them to kind of get this consensus ranking. And I'll kind of give you, I won't go through the whole top 25, but just to give you an idea, and it's what you'd expect. Georgia, number 1, Michigan, number 2, Ohio State, number 3, Alabama, number 4, LSU, 5, Penn State, 6, USC, 7, Florida State, 8, Clemson, 9, and Washington, 10. I'll add Notre Dame in there at 11 since we know the Buckeyes face the Irish here fairly early on in the season. So that's where kind of the people who have done ranks so far, if you put it all together, that's where they are, this consensus poll. I wanted to just kind of give my opinion on kind of what I see from the Buckeyes this year in terms of where I see them fitting in. If you're watching this live, want to throw your comments in the comment section about kind of where you would rank the Buckeyes headed in the season. Look, I think 3 is a fair spot going into the year for Ohio State. Right now, if Georgia's got to be the top dog, they're 2-time national champions, back-to-back. They've got a lot of talent returning. And, I think Michigan, Ohio State, just looking on paper, it's very close. Michigan has a lot of talent returning as well. But what's happened the last 2 years. you want to change that ranking going into next season, you go up to Ann Arbor, like DeVier was just saying, and you beat the Wolverines. But right now, Michigan's earned the right with the talent they have coming back, plus beating Ohio State in back-to-back years. And I know people watching this probably won't like to hear it, but I think if you're looking at it from a neutral perspective, it's fair to say that Michigan deserves to be slightly above Ohio State right now in a national perspective. Alabama at 4, I think, is an interesting one because this isn't the Alabama teams we've seen recently. Now, across the board, talent-wise, I think they're still very, very good. But in maybe the most important position at quarterback, they have not been able to find a starter, and it's not the situation that Ohio State has, where you have two really good options coming back that both have seen a little bit, if not more, game time, and you trust that one of them will emerge. But Alabama had to go into the transfer portal and pull out Notre Dame's Tyler Buckner, and I think Tyler Buckner is a solid quarterback, but from what Alabama has had recently with Heisman Trophy winners and whatnot, this seems like a strange situation to be in if you're Nick Saban. And look, Alabama's won with a number of different type of quarterbacks, and they've figured out ways to do it without having maybe that superstar quarterback. So I'm not saying that the Crimson Tide don't deserve to be there and maybe will be there at the end of the season in that top 4, but I think it is just a different look. And interestingly enough, of that top 4, only Michigan has a returning starting quarterback. So everyone's looking for a quarterback. The fact that that Alabama had to go get a Notre Dame quarterback transfer and not one that has lit things up like what Notre Dame did, I think is interesting. LSU had a strong end to last season, going to the SEC championship game. I think you all know what Penn State is. USC coming up just short of the playoff. The Buckeyes obviously benefited from that. I will be very interested with the Trojans. Sorry about my dog. She's losing her mind today. Usually she's outside during this. She didn't want to go outside earlier. Now she does. But she'll have to wait. USC, look, you have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback coming back. But we've seen these second years of quarterbacks that had won the Heisman that next year, it doesn't always go as well. And there will be at some point, I have to imagine, a quarterback that bucks that trend and has another year. And whether they win the Heisman twice or not, maybe that's Caleb Williams. Obviously, some injuries late in the season affected him. He's not the biggest of guys. But my biggest thing with USC is until that defense gets fixed, it's the same thing we've had conversations with about Ohio State. I don't trust the Trojans to get to that college football playoff level. We know a lot being in Columbus about the defensive coordinator at USC. The fact that they've struggled so much there, nothing's changed, is interesting to me. But that's my thought on USC, and kind of I'm not ready to put them in that upper echelon until they prove that side of the ball. Florida State, I think, is an interesting one. Florida State and Clemson 8 and 9 in this consensus poll, and it's probably one of those two teams is going to be the ACC champion. Florida State, one of the few teams in the top of these top teams that has a returning quarterback. Clemson as well, though I think he only threw 100 passes last year, Cade Klubnik. So I'm interested to see that and kind of how that battle plays out throughout the ACC season, and just how they fix some of the issues at Clemson. Obviously, the quarterback play has not been as good as it had been in the past, but they've had some other issues too. But that is a very talented roster if the quarterback situation and the offense can be what it has been in the past. And then looking outside those top 10 teams and maybe team or two that could surprise somebody. I said this when Dave Biddle and I talked on Monday's Bucknuts Morning 5. Texas is a team that I'm going to have as a dark horse this year until they prove me wrong. And they're the favorite in the Big 12, their final year in the Big 12. They've got Quinn Ewers at quarterback, whom I know Ohio State fans would like to see. Most of them would like to see him not have success, but I think he's a very good quarterback. I think that they have plenty of talent around him. You saw a team that, was up and down a little bit last year, but certainly had some success. I will be interested to see how Quinn evolves. Shaved off the mullet, talked about growing up. It was time to grow up, I think is the quote he had. So how that plays out for him. That could be a team that I think if they win that conference, they could be a team to sneak into the college football playoff, depending on how other things play out. Tennessee coming off last year where they finished 11-2, had a Heisman Trophy candidate at quarterback until he got hurt. I think that it's hard to – you need to build on that if you're Tennessee and you want to be consistently back at where you once were. I don't know if Joe Milton is the answer there at quarterback. They also lost their top receiver who won the Blitnikoff last year over Marvin Harrison. And then another one, TCU, down at 18 in this consensus poll. This is a team that played for the national championship last year. Now, they lost plenty of talent from that team. Probably not a team like some of the others that can reload and build on that success. But I will keep an eye on TCU throughout the year just to see if there is the chance to kind of build on that success. And then the final one I'm going to bring up is Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin could, if the offense can get going quickly with the new offensive coordinator under Luke Fickell, be a interesting team in the Big Ten. I think in the Big Ten, you've got your Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State in some order, and those are the favorites to win the conference. But Wisconsin's got to be one of the favorites out of the Western Division. And, if they can get the offense going, I have faith in Luke Fickell to have the defense playing well. That's a team that could be interesting in the Big Ten race. Other than that, I think it's the three East teams. And remember, Ohio State has to go to Madison this year, which will never be an easy game. So that was kind of an abbreviated version. Maybe we'll dive into this a little bit more next week since we went so long with DeVier, but I think DeVier had some really good things to say. I really enjoyed that. If you missed that, go back and you can listen to it in podcast. You can watch it on YouTube, all that. We're going to cut this off because I think if I don't let my dog outside, she's going to just lose her mind here soon. But thank you all for listening. This has been another episode of the Bucknuts Morning, did the Bucknuts Morning 5 earlier this week. The Bucknuts Happy Hour. Thanks again to DeVier. Thanks for everyone who tuned in. Thanks for everyone who watched live. We appreciate it and enjoy the weekend. We'll be back next week. Cheers.